Elif's Adventures.
Manti.
Author Zeliha Sekmenoğlu.
Elif and Merve lived in neighbouring houses. They spent hours playing together, sometimes laughing, sometimes sulking. One day, while they were playing outside, Merve suddenly stopped and said to Elif, "Do you know, Elif? My mum makes the best manti ever. They're so good I can't even describe it." Merve's eyes sparkled as she spoke. Just thinking about the manti made her excited. She gestured with her fingers, as if explaining how they were made. "Look, they're tiny, really tiny, but not just small, the tiniest and the most delicious ones ever," she added. Elif responded with a smile, but her tone suggested she was a bit tired of the praise. All right, they're amazing. But how do I know they're the best? I haven't even tasted them." Merve wasn't fazed by Elif's comment and answered confidently, "Fine, I'll ask my mom to make some for us. Then you'll see. I'm serious. You'll love them." Elif thought about the offer for a moment. Manti sounded great, and Merve couldn't stop talking about how amazing they were. But Elif still had doubts. Her mum was an excellent cook too. Could Merve's mum really be better? The next day, and the days that followed, every time Elif saw Merve, she would ask, "What happened to the manti? Weren't we supposed to eat manti?" Or, "Did you bring us manti?" At first, Merve didn't take it seriously, but Elif kept cornering her at every chance. Merve made up all kinds of excuses to avoid her. Over time, this became a real problem for Merve. Worse, Elif would sometimes shout, "Merve! Manti!" out of nowhere. When turning corners, Merve started peeking ahead to make sure Elif wasn't there. If someone called her name from behind, she'd think it was Elif and run without looking back. If something touched her foot, she'd jump, thinking Elif had snuck up on her. This situation became unbearable. Merve realised she had to tell her mum about her promise to Elif. At first, Merve's mum wasn't too eager to make manti, but Merve insisted so much that her mum finally gave in. "Fine, tell your friends to come over tomorrow," her mum said. Merve rushed to the balcony and called out, "Elif! Elif! My mom says you and your sisters should come for manti tomorrow." "All right, Merve, see you tomorrow," Elif replied. But deep down, Elif didn't believe her. "I bet she's stalling again. If she's tricking me, she'll regret it," she thought to herself. The next day, Elif and her sisters woke up early. "You shouldn't go this early. It's rude," their mum warned, but she couldn't stop Elif. "We'll play outside for a while before we go," Elif replied. "Fine, but don't go straight there," their mum said firmly. As soon as they were outside, Elif ignored her sister's protests and went straight to Merve's door. She rang the bell, and they had no choice but to wait, feeling a little embarrassed. Merve's younger siblings, ages 3 and 2, opened the door. They were quite naughty, and Elif didn't like them at all. "We're here," Elif said. The 2 children ran inside shouting, "They're here! They're here! That girl is here!" There was a flurry of movement inside the house. Clearly, no one was expecting guests this early. Elif and her sisters stood awkwardly by the open door, waiting to be invited in. Growing impatient, Elif rang the bell again and shouted, "Merve, we're here!" Finally, Merve came rushing to the door. "Welcome! We just woke up. That's why we were late," she said, letting them in. Merve and her siblings sat on one couch, while Elif and her sisters sat on the one across. "Welcome! My mum has been making manti since last night, those tiny ones. She's really tired, but she finally finished," Merve said proudly. "We'll see how good they are," Elif began, but her sister nudged her. I'm sure they're delicious," Elif corrected herself quickly. Merve's little siblings were as restless as ever. jumping all over the place. At one point, one of them got behind Elif and gave her a hard shove with his foot. Elif fell face first into the middle of the room, arms and legs sprawled out. The fall was so sudden that her nose hit the ground hard. They helped her up, but before she could sit down, her nose started to bleed. Her sister gasped in horror. "Elif, your nose is bleeding!" Elif couldn't stand the sight of blood. "Blood?" she muttered, before fainting on the spot. Hearing the commotion, Merve's mum came into the room to find Elif lying flat on the floor. Her glasses had slid off and were perched crookedly on her head. Thin trails of blood trickled from her nostrils. Merve's mum was taken aback but quickly acted. She helped Elif up and asked Merve to bring cotton and some cologne. After some chaos, Elif finally regained consciousness. She lay stretched out on the couch with her nose stuffed with cotton. "I can't breathe! How long do these have to stay in my nose?" Elif complained. Her sisters tried to calm her down. "Elif, dear, just be patient. Let the bleeding stop, and then we'll take them out." "Rest for a little while," Merve's mum said gently. As Elif waited, she thought to herself, "Look at the trouble I've gone through for some Manti." She glanced at Merve's mischievous siblings, still bouncing on the couch, and muttered, "It's all because of those brats." Soon, there was another flurry of activity. A long tablecloth was spread on the floor, and plates of Manti were placed on it. In the centre was a bowl of yogurt, half with garlic and half plain, along with some sauce. Elif was very hungry. She kept eyeing the plates and counting. "This one's mine, that one's Aishi's, this one's Merve's. Wait a minute, there was one extra plate." She counted again. Yes, if everyone had one plate of Manti, there would still be one left over. She turned to Merve's mum. Auntie, you've put out one extra plate," Elif said. "Yes, I left an extra in case someone wants more," Merve's mum replied. Elif quickly sat down at the table. The cotton was still in her nose. She wanted to take it out, but the bleeding hadn't stopped completely, so she had to leave it in. She quickly finished the Manti on her plate, but wasn't full yet. The plates were large and shallow, and Merve's mum hadn't filled them too much, thinking the children wouldn't be able to finish. Elif's eyes were fixed on the extra plate. She waited, hoping someone would offer it to her, but everyone was busy eating and didn't notice her longing gaze. "Well, I'll just take it myself. Auntie said it was for anyone who wanted more," she thought. Just as she reached out, one of Merve's younger siblings beat her to it, sticking his spoon into the plate. Normally, Elif didn't mind sharing food with her siblings, but this time was different. She glared at the little boy, but the sight she saw was enough to make her lose her appetite. The boy had yogurt smeared all over his cheeks, which he was licking with his tongue, and was wiping his runny nose with one hand while looking at Elif with a smug expression, as if to say, "This plate is mine." Realizing she wouldn't be able to eat from that plate, Elif picked up her own and went to the kitchen. "Auntie, is there any more Manti?" she asked. "Of course, dear. Give me your plate, and I'll fill it for you," Merve's mum replied, adding more Manti to Elif's plate. Elif returned to the table excitedly and started eating quickly. Suddenly she felt a sharp pain in her head. Merve's younger siblings had thrown a large soccer ball at her from behind. Merve finally lost her patience. She grabbed her two siblings by the arms and dragged them out of the room. Then she returned to Elif's side. Elif was frozen in place, her mouth full of Manti, the cotton still in her nose, and her glasses bent from the impact. But she didn't make a sound. "Elif, are you okay? Say something!" Her sister shook her gently. After a moment of shock, Elif opened her mouth and spat all the chewed Manti into her hand. Mixed in with the mush was something else, a tooth. "Elif, your tooth fell out," Merve shouted. When Elif saw her tooth, she couldn't hold back her tears anymore and began to wail loudly. This was too much for one day. Even Elif couldn't handle it. Merve's mum was very apologetic and took great care of Elif. She put the fallen tooth into a small matchbox for safekeeping. Despite everything, Elif didn't forget to ask for leftovers. As she left with her sisters, she had a plate of Manti in one hand, cotton still stuffed in her nose, and a missing tooth. "Thank you, Auntie. If you make Manti again, could you bring us a plate too?" she said cheerfully.